Greetings, programs, and welcome back to the Awesome Friday podcast, the only podcast on the whole internet in which two films are discussed by me, Matthew, and my co-host, Simon. And that's a true fact. You can take that right to the bank. This week we're talking about the new Star Wars thing, The Acolyte, and also the new Netflix French action film Under Paris, Sous la Seine, in which a shark is shockingly in Paris. Before we get started, let's say hi to Simon. How are you today, Simon?
Well, let's say hi to me. Hi, everyone. Good. I'm fine. I mean, if you are a Patreon, you've heard me tell you that it's my daughter's birthday and we're prepping her party. And I'm most excited it's karaoke, so I'm most excited to sing in front of my 10-year-old daughter's friends and thoroughly embarrass her. That's mainly going to be...
Just for the public record, please tell the audience how many 10-year-old girls are going to be at this party, and then tell them which song you are committed to sing with your whole chest to all of them.
A little bit of context. Well, first of all, there's going to be 7 plus 1 plus my daughter. So that's 8 10-year-old girls and 1 13-year-old boy, my son. And I know most of them. They're pretty cool. In fact, they're very, very cool. And the song I will be singing is Olivia Rodrigo's Obsessed, which is the best song of whatever year that came out. And I used to, for many, many years, I was in a rock band. I was the singer in a band. And I put my whole being into being the singer of a band. And what I hope to recreate for them, because my kids never saw me perform on stage in anything, and that upsets me. So I'm going to try and capture that magic for them by jumping around my my front room with my mic hooked up to the PC, playing over the top of YouTube videos. I'm really looking forward to it because I think they're going to learn something today. I think they're going to learn something about music and performance.
I would just like to point out that, like, this full sentence should be, your children have not seen you perform yet. And not just for today, but also, like, you can always go back to it. I have faith that one day I will see you on stage as well, because I've only seen you in such cinematic classics as 2012, and as and your recurring role, and your recurring role as parent of graduating teen in like every movie shot in Vancouver from like 2008 to 2010.
So something I found out, I was many people's father. So the Kenko advert that I shot here that I never heard of, I had some friends visit from Wales as they were passing through to Kelowna. And apparently that advert ran in the UK for ages and lots of people recognized me in it. And that's pretty cool.
Wait, which one is that the Charlie Chaplin one, or is that a different
one? I can't find that one. No, this was a Kenko advert where they were advertising a reduced packaging to help the environment. And so I was a guy with a handful of ground coffee who had to try and open a door and failing miserably and falling backwards. I had to do a stunt. I got paid to do a stunt. It was great.
I remember that ad. Was that in the same? No, that was a different series than the one where you were like person in a cinema with fancy food, right?
That's Minecraft. That was Minecraft when there was still Minecraft on Arbutus.
I think you mean Mineheart.
No, I need sorry, I don't mean either. It was for Mein Kampf, the reprint.
Oh no, no.
Which is it? The Simpsons where they make a joke, Mein Kampfy chair.
I don't. No, we're not going down this road. That's awful. I'm not.
Anyway.
No,
that was Mineheart's on Arbutus. Yes.
Yeah, which for those of you who aren't in Vancouver is a very fancy grocery store.
It's extremely expensive.
Well, I'm glad you're commercial famous in the UK. That's great. It's
I've had
more than most people get.
I've had one person recognize me in Vancouver from a commercial, and that was a glorious day. That's it. One person in like how many years have I been here now?
Well, like I say, at some point, I have full faith that I will see you on a local stage at least. So,
why? Thank you.
Go do that. Your kids are old enough; you can go do that now.
Yeah, maybe.
She's 10. She's 10. She can handle if you're.
I know. Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. Anyways. But anything of note apart from you watching all of the stuff? I don't actually know when you actually sleep because you keep just watching everything and writing very nice writing about everything. Go and check out Matt's writing in places.
Oh,
and when do you actually sleep though?
I thank you for saying that. And the reason is that right now is the annual Tribeca Film Festival, which I am covering remotely from home. So you can find reviews of a number of films already published. By the time you listen to this, there will be six or seven reviews published in a couple of different outlets, including both That Shelf and Movies We Texted About, and I think one will be on Exclaim. I can't remember now. It's been a bit of a blur the past couple of days because I've watched a lot of stuff. And I've seen things like there's a new documentary called Brats, which is made by oh god, his name just went out of my head. McCarthy. He was in the Andrew McCarthy. He was in the Brat Pack, and the whole film is basically him trying to like reconnect with the other members of the Brat Pack and perhaps find some like closure for that era in his life. Which, and I say this in my review that like it's difficult to feel bad for rich people who are in movies, but like the article that came out and branded in the Brat Pack did affect literally everyone who got branded as part of that group in an interesting in different ways, and it's interesting to see him grapple with that as an artist. And I got to see the new Jake Gyllenhaal show, Presumed Innocent, an update of the 90s classic Harrison Ford movie, and a number of other things. So, yeah, if you're interested in any or all of that, you should go to my website, stretched.ca, where they will all be linked. Several of them already are as of this recording.
Yes, do that.
And thank you for the kind words, as always. I don't know that they're true, but I do watch and write.
Oh, they are. Do you know how you know it's true? Because you've learned how to write through the old-fashioned way of writing a lot. I invite you to go back to 10 years ago and read what you wrote 10 years ago, and then read what you're writing now, and then go, yeah, okay, I got it. And that's true not you specifically. That's true for many writers.
I would say that I can do that and still think that my own writing is bad. So I can admit that it is improved, but it is still not good. But maybe that's just my imposter syndrome. Who's to say?
Do you know what's really good for imposter syndrome? And this sounds really arrogant, but I want to share this because I have terrible imposter syndrome and I overthink my writing. And when I was writing a lot more about movies and games, when I would get really stuck and too critical, I would read other stuff that was being published on big sites and go, oh, okay, no, I'm fine.
Oh, yeah, I do that as well.
Much better. Much, much better. Because it is... this is a much wider conversation about Google and content and AI, but the things I look up these days for reviews or information are either so bad or so clearly AI generated that it almost makes me think, well, what's the point of writing anyway? But if you are motivated to write, if you're using any kind of technique at all, then you're already doing far better than 90% of everyone else.
I mean, I try. One thing I noticed, and I don't want to single any one person out here, but one thing I have noticed about a lot of film and TV reviews in the last several years is that I don't actually think a lot of them are necessarily AI generated, although that's definitely a thing. But there's definitely a pattern of like, here's a plot summary and I liked it, or here's a plot summary and I didn't like it, without a lot of like,
yeah, totally,
like investigation of that. And so I'm definitely guilty of that at times as well. And usually it comes when something is very like medium, when it's sort of fine, like it's difficult to come up with something interesting to say. But that's what I always try to shoot for, is not just that I liked something, but why, or that I didn't like something, but why. And I think that actually the thing, so we're talking about the Acolyte today, and I've actually already published a review on exclaim.ca for that, and I think that I did a pretty good job of that there. And I think that my review of Presumed Innocent is pretty good too. So hopefully y'all agree, but if you don't, tell me. I'd love to hear your differing opinions. And I will say too that like my sort of gold standard for film writing, someone who I will always read is David Ehrlich. There's a lot of other ones, but David Ehrlich and like Bill Gabiri, and I really love Siddhant Adlakha, and Film Crit Hulk as well. And the reason I love them is that no matter whether they like something or not, they are always compelling and well thought out in their explanation and argument for why. And I'm not trying to say that I'm as good as them, because I don't think that I am, and probably never will. But that is the type of writing I at least aspire to be. So, and if you definitely check out those writers, they're all great. Same with like YouTuber Patrick Willems, or Folding Ideas, or Maggie Mayfish is another great one. Lindsay Ellis, like a lot of the people who really, those are the people who inspire me personally. So they can inspire you too. They're all great writers and great speakers.
Yeah, it's good. Well, great writers are great readers, so it's good that it's so important to absorb all that and steal technique where you see it.
Yeah, and also like I pretty compulsively log everything I watched on Letterboxd, and I try to post thoughtful reviews on things that I want to be thoughtful about, but I'm also not above being like, lol, one line joke here about something I've just watched either. So I think it's important to let yourself have the freedom to do that in your own space. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. Good. Well, that's marvelous. Should we get into one of our things?
Yeah, let's talk about Star Wars, I think. So you are our resident lifelong Star Wars lover.
Yeah, baby, that's what I tell my wife.
Yeah. Get down on it anyway. Why don't you give us a quick rundown? Now, you've seen the first 2 episodes of Star Wars: The Acolyte, and because those 2 episodes are available, they premiered this week. And I have seen the first 4, so I would very much like to hear your sort of summation of the setup of the show and your basic impressions so far.
Well, we have to be careful, I guess, not to talk about episodes 3 and 4, especially as things happen, as far as I gather.
I should point out that, like, just for anyone who's listening, like, I think we will do our best to keep this as spoiler free as possible. But also, those 2 episodes are out, and we're going to talk about some stuff that happens in them. So if you want to go in cold, maybe come back later.
Yeah, maybe.
But like, there's one thing I know for a fact we're going to talk about that is, but it's also literally the first thing that happens in the show. So do be warned. We'll be having some light spoilers for this portion of the discussion.
Yeah.
But again, for stuff that you like have the opportunity to see.
So The Acolyte is a show set 100 years before the prequels, which was news to me. I thought it was like Old Republic until I literally started watching it. And for mysterious reasons, somebody is attacking, and spoiler, killing Jedi. And this is a surprise to all the Jedi who are basically living in a time where the Republic is stable. This is the High Republic era. The Jedis are the peacekeepers. Peacekeepers. They are not especially challenged from any corner. They study and they meditate and they grow and they teach. So it is a supposed time of stability. So to have someone who was clearly trained in something attacking, goading, and killing Jedi is very troubling. And it's also interesting that none of them can really sense what's going on. Ostensibly, it revolves around a character called Soul, who's a Jedi Master played by the fantastic Jung-jae Lee Jung-jae from the Squid Games. Thank you, not Splinter Cell. Squid Games, who apparently I learned very recently learned English for this role, which is fascinating to me because he's got a really interesting kind of old school Jedi delivery. He's very every one of his sentences takes time, but it doesn't feel like he's clutching for the language. He sounds like he's really contemplating everything he's saying. And for that to be like his first English role is kind of shocking to me. But he's really good. He really suits that part of that very that kind of classic, almost monk-like Jedi era, and it's a nice transposition against the younger Jedi that stick with him. There's one played by called Yord by Charlie Bartlett, and a very young Jedi called Jung-jae played by the wonderful Daphne Keane, who you may remember from Logan and from His Dark Materials. She's one of the most exciting young actors working today. And what I really like about the show, that I've read into some things on the internet, and I don't understand how people can miss some basic things about the character structure of this group. And that you've got your older Jedi Knight being the more monk-like, and you've got the young upstarts who you've got brand new Jedi Charlie Bartlett, who's only just been made like a Jedi, a full Jedi, who's very impulsive, very he's got a lot to learn. And then you've got his Padawan Jackie, who is it echoed in Anakin and Obi-Wan, the kind of talks back to the master, is kind of the person who maybe thinks outside the box, but is very, very practical in her own means as well. It's a really interesting trio, I think, because it's got all the different stages of the Jedi's together, and I don't understand why people would not understand that. But that's a wider question about people on the internet, isn't it?
It's a pretty broad question about people on the
internet. Yeah. So basically, the person identified. So the slight spoiler we have to give you is that the pre-credit sequence is an assassin, Amanda Stenberg's character, who is an assassin, hunting down Carrie-anne Moss's Jedi character Indara in a bar, and basically like, I want you to hit me as hard as you can, and of course, Carrie-anne Moss being a Jedi is like, no, I'm not going to do that, clearly, and so this assassin starts hurting other people in order to push the Jedi into retaliation. And the assassin wins. I'm sorry this is a spoiler. I'm sorry if you love Carrie-anne Moss.
It's not a spoiler because it's literally the first thing that happens in the first episode. Like, one thing you figure out when you're writing and talking about a movie online, one thing you have to figure out really, really early is that, in my opinion, first act stuff is totally okay. And this isn't just first act. This is literally the first thing that happens in the show. And like, it's interesting because like, so this is technically a spoiler, but like, she's one of the biggest names in that show, so I think it's a pretty easy jump to like, oh, there's going to be flashbacks because like, she's the biggest name in the show and she dies in the first sequence. So anyway,
so the standout point about this is that the fight is fantastic. Mm-hmm. And if you've listened to the show, you know that fight choreography and framing and editing and shooting is one of my bugbears. Like we've talked about it in Monkey Man, we talked about it last week in Boy Kills World. It's so unnecessarily jumpy and close sometimes, and it was a real pleasure to watch a fight sequence done in a Star Wars TV show that was so good. It's brilliantly shot. It's very intelligently shot, but the choreography and the editing, which is vital, is absolutely on point. And what I love is that the assassin is not using a lightsaber; she uses like throwing knives, but lots and lots of sort of. If you think about the what's called wuxia kung fu, so the non-gravity obeying kung fu that's used in Crouching Tiger, very famously a big part of Asian cinema of that era. This kind of fantasy things where the body can do more things than can do in real life in terms of flipping through the air and obeying or disregarding gravity. And so you've got her as this martial artist doing all kinds of kicks and flips against Carrie-anne Moss's Jedi, who's doing classic Jedi moves, and it just works so well. It looks so good. It's a great. It's common knowledge that Star Wars came from a love of Asian movies like The Seven Samurai. George Lucas loved those movies. So having
Hidden Fortress, man, like did you watch Hidden Fortress? Too, yeah. You watch Hidden Fortress. You're basically just watching A New Hope.
Yeah. And so the DNA's always been there, but to see that mix of Asian, like the fantastical element of Asian martial arts up against the sort of the harsher swordplay lines of the Jedi, it looks great. And there's another fight later on in the second episode that I think is just as good. So for me, that's a huge surprise because I'm so used to seeing bad fight choreo, especially in Marvel shows or Disney shows in the wider umbrella, that they got it right here. They got it really, really right. The combination of whoever choreographed this and then shot it and then edited it has got it absolutely right. And it's such a pleasure. So many witnesses see this character, and turns out she used to be they identify her as the ex-Padawan of Jung-jae's character Sol. And this is in the marketing material as well. It's not a huge spoiler, but it turns out that there were twin sisters, both played by the same actor here, brilliantly played into two very different characters by Amanda Stenberg, who you may have seen in Bodies, Bodies, Bodies as well. She is fantastic. Like, she's so good. She's so in the moment, and she's so good at these two different characters. So her sort of the good twin, May, joins up with the Jedi group to try and hunt down the bad twin. And the interesting thing is that neither of them knew that the other was still alive. And so you've got some really good character work in there as well. So basically, you've got a bit of a cat and mouse game, and you've got to hunt for this person who's hunting down Jedi. And 95% of it, I'm totally on board. Unfortunately, this being Star Wars, they've added in the mysterious Sith in black. Who's it going to be? They're wearing a mask and they're talking through a voice detector, a voice changer. That at some point there's going to be a grand reveal. It's like, oh, the baddie was him all along. And we've also got the Sith igniting a lightsaber, standing on a rock for no reason whatsoever, just to look cool, which is one of my absolute pet hates for Star Wars, is just lightsabers being thrown around for punctuation. And there's a few like other little needles as well, but for the most part, I was expecting this to be kind of bad, and I really like it. I really, really like it. I'm kind of over Jedi Sith stuff, really, because I want it to go after The Last Jedi. I thought it was going in really interesting ways, and this feels like the first kind of thing that thematically feels like an extension of where The Last Jedi was going a little bit. Like, there's lots of questions about the Jedi being asked here. Mm-hmm. And I really like the different levels and how there's been a when I was growing up, the Force was the good Force. And what I think is really interesting is this kind of pivot to the Force is just the Force. It's a tool. And you either use it for good or you use it for evil, but it's your choice what to do with it. And this idea of choice as well, which goes back to Rey in The Last Jedi, of how to use the Force, because the Force is impartial, it's passive. Mm-hmm. You have to choose which side of the Force you're going to use. And so I really like that being a central part of this as well.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of good stuff here.
Not to be too nerdy, but also like really goes back to the character of the Bendu in the Star Wars Rebels TV show, who's an ancient Force user who, like, at one point is like directly asked about whether they're good or bad, and they're like, neither with the Force. It's really, really interesting. Yeah, everything you're saying here is basically my point. I think Amanda Stenberg is really good. I think that they are. I know they went through several weeks or months of fight training to come up to speed for the scenes where they're mask is off because the May, the bad twin, ostensibly the bad twin, wears a mask during the fights. And I would love to know how much of it is her, how much of it is them, and how much of it is their stunt double. But either way, it's so expertly cut together, and the way that May wins that first fight is like pretty perfect. I don't want to spoil the actual end of the fight, other than like Carrie-anne Moss dies, but the way Carrie-anne Moss's character dies is pretty perfect, and really betrays immediately like just how capable May is or is not. There's a lot of really interesting things happening with May. Like the first thing she says to two different Jedi Masters is "attack me with all of your strength," which at first glance like goes like, why would a Jedi attack? Like that's not really their deal. But it's an interesting setup for like what she thinks Jedi are. And with only 2 episodes done, and I've seen the first 4, I can tell you there's definitely more to the story there. Like if that's not already obvious, but like what it's interesting how it illuminates what her perception of the Jedi is, and her perception of these people she's trying to fight is. And I can't wait to see where that goes. The standout, like I think my favorite line that I wrote in my review was about Charlie Barnett's Yord, who I think I said he's so by the book, it's a surprise it's not under his arm at all times.
Yeah, that's a good line. She gives herself a pat on the back for that
one. And Daphne King, I think, is good. I think she's an exciting young actress. I think that her performance is a little bit flat for me personally, and I can't quite articulate why. I think she's doing what she can with the material she's been given, but there's like an uncomfortableness there, and I think it's meant to be part of the character who's like a young, unsure of themselves Padawan, who's being allowed to come into their own through the tutelage of Master Soul. But it kind of affects the performance in a way that it's not bad. It's just uncomfortable, like it's kind of telegraphy in a way that the rest of the show isn't, if that makes sense. Like a little bit stagey in a way that the rest of the show kind of isn't, and maybe a little bigger than it needs to be. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling about it, but you look like you have an opinion about this.
No, I don't disagree at all. I love Daphne King, and for me actually, she's throwing her lines away too conversationally. Like she's not.
Yeah, maybe it's just too informal. Maybe it's as someone who as a character who like grew up a Jedi, because the Jedi famously kidnap children and train them to be warrior monks. As someone who grew up in that, maybe she's a little bit too formal or informal, right? Like what makes sense about Osha, Amandla Stenberg's ostensibly good twin, is that they were a Padawan, and then they left the Order, and they have interesting perspective on what the Jedi are. And I feel like maybe Jecki, Daphne Keen's character, is a little too close to that, or maybe it's just an artifact of this being a period of the Jedi that we've never seen before. Maybe it's just that's how they were. I look forward to seeing more of it. Basically.
Yeah, for me, from a performance point of view, she's just throwing her lines instead of delivering them. Like she's delivered almost too conversationally, and I think she might be. She's a little off the mark in terms of the performance this character needed. I don't think she looks very comfortable. One thing about the show is like sometimes the hair and makeup is not good, and I don't think her. I think her look needed another pass. And there's one Jedi that turns up with the fakest beard since Hugh McGregor had one in episode 2. It just looks like it's been stuck on with glue. It's terrible. But yeah, she is muted in this. She is.
Yeah, I will say that like I'll come back to the effects in a moment, but I will also say that the clear standout is Lee Jung-jae, who is so good and maybe the most interesting Jedi character we've seen since Qui-Gon. And like I'm no defender of the prequel trilogy. Like I know that people love those movies now in a way that we just didn't in 1997. For those of you who lived through the before times will remember. but he's so much more interesting than like 99% of the other Jedi we've ever seen before, just in terms of his conception of like, again, like what the Jedi are and what they should be, and the way he behaves, and the way he's not willing to forego his attachments. There's a very early scene where someone says, "Why don't you let go?" And he says, "Well, our memories are lessons." And I think there's like a real, it's such a simple line, but it sort of betrays like, so one thing I really like about this show, and again, not a defender of the prequel trilogy, but a big part of the prequel trilogy is that the Jedi were kind of bad at their jobs. And it's a very easy line to draw from the way the Jedi behave, like the Jedi Order behaves in this series 100 years before, to the way they are in the prequels. Much more concerned with appearance, much more concerned with the way things will be perceived and the way things are, and Lee Jung-jae being the only one who's like, I need to address this as it is, I need to deal with this, and the rest of the Order being like, oh, let's just keep it quiet, it's fine. You know? And the Jedi that so again, that May's character is attacking 4 specific Jedi, of which Saul is one. And the way that so far they have each reacted when she shows up is also super interesting. And again, I have seen more than Simon, but I will say that each of them has a different reaction, and it's never bad. It's always interesting to see how they each are dealing with it. I can tell you wholeheartedly, like, so obviously we've already talked, Carrie-anne Moss dies immediately, but again, she's the biggest name in that show. It is a pretty narrow jump to get to there will be a flashback character, and you mentioned a character with the fakest beard in the world, and that's because in the flashback episode, which is coming, that character is played by a young man, like a very young man. Like, I think Dean Charles Chapman, famous for playing the Child King Tommen in Game of Thrones, and Billy Elliot on stage, is 25, and he's playing like a 40-year-old in that scene. You know, it's and you're right, it's not great, and I also don't think that Daphne Keene's makeup is great. But what I will say is that I kind of appreciate how bad it is, which is a weird thing to say, but it feels like the cheap sci-fi of my childhood in a way that I kind of like low-key appreciate. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, totally.
It's not good, but it reminds me of like in the 70s when Star Wars was made for no money, and every knockoff sci-fi was made for no money. You know,
I saw it and thought Logan's Run straight away, so I agree with you totally.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, but to come back to it, yeah, Lee Jung-jae is the standout, and when you do get more of Carrie-anne Moss, I think she's good. I think she has, so far from what I've seen, she has precious little to do in this series, though. Like, I think it's cool that she's there. I think she always kicks ass, but like, she has so little to do. It's not even. It's kind of almost disappointing. For me, again, having seen the first 4, the 3rd episode is the clear standout. I'm really excited for people to see episode 3, which was also directed by one of my favorite directors, Kogonada. And it's wild to me that Kogonada is doing a Star Wars. It's such it doesn't, his whole vibe, this is the guy who made Columbus and After Yang, and his whole vibe is not very Star Wars, but that alone is very exciting to me. It works. It's, again, so far it's my favorite episode.
All right.
I'm very excited for people to see it. My biggest trepidation with the show so far, I think it's very good. But I laid this out in my written review as well, is that I thought Ahsoka started really strong. And I thought that The Mandalorian seasons 1, 2, and 3 all started very strong. I thought the first 2 episodes of Boba Fett started very strongly. And most of those shows ended badly. And I'm really, really worried that'll be the case here too. Like, I've been burned by Star Wars on TV a lot. And I want to say I have high hopes, but I have to say that I am like steeling myself for a fumbled land, because they do that like a lot. And I will also say that, like, and I don't say that just because those shows are bad. I'm saying because, like, as much as this show is good, it is also doing things that I recognize from other shows, like ending on little teases that feel out of place, and structurally being a bit janky in terms of like what sort of like things should show up in what episodes and where they show up in those episodes. Like the structure is not. It's that thing where like it's a mistake to think an 8 episode show is just a long movie and you can cut wherever. And this movie isn't as bad as this. Sorry, the show is not as bad as that. As some other shows are, but it's not great at it either. It is structurally a little bit janky, and it's making me worried for the end. And like when Disney gives you a show to watch, and they give you say 4 episodes out of a total of 8, they almost always give you up to some big reveal or cliffhanger, and it's very difficult to judge what's going to happen past that point regardless. And I don't know, I've been burned by Star Wars too many times. I really hope that it ends well. I really hope that it ends well, and I love it, but I'm really worried that it's going to end poorly, and I'm going to be very disappointed. And I know that's not necessarily a review of the show itself, but it's kind of a review of the state of Star Wars on TV. But also, I think it's valid. I think that like it's difficult for me to be excited about the show because of how the other shows have treated me as a viewer. So, yeah, that's just how I feel, basically.
I mean, there's a reason why at the top I said I'm pretty cynical going into Star Wars these days, and that's because of exactly everything you're saying. Like that Ahsoka did not end well, and it started very strongly. I didn't like Boba Fett at all from front to back, but unfortunately, I'm watching The Acolyte, and because I go in with zero expectations, I am enjoying what it's doing. But in my head, I'm like, when are they going to fuck it up? When are they already at the end of the first episode? The last 10 seconds of the first episode really brought me back down to earth, because it was just like, here's the Sith guy standing on a rock with a lightsaber for no reason. And I was like, oh, they're just going to do that. So they're just doing that again. And so my expectations are tempered. I would love it to stick the landing. How many episodes in total are we getting? Is it 8?
8. Yeah.
8. So we're only halfway through. I hope.
Well, you're only a quarter of the way. Anyone who's watching it on TV is only a quarter of the way in, and I'm halfway in. And again, like
I hope it finds the end.
I hope it finds the end. And Star Wars has always been a franchise of archetypes, and it's very easy to see those archetypes come. Like, I will be very surprised if the twin characters, who are ostensibly good and bad, need to band together to like use their combined forceness to save the day at the end of the show. You know. Against an enemy who's wearing a mask now, but we probably definitely met already. You know, like there's a lot of things that are probably going to happen.
Do you know what I really hate in Star Wars as well, is when they retroactively add stuff that makes stuff from the original seemingly more important than they already were. So what I really don't want, and maybe I shouldn't look at you while I say this, is there to be this sudden revelation that the Jedi, the Force, like the midichlorians, favor twins. So we know we get Luke and Leia. Is that revealed in the original trilogy? Because there's a set of twins in this as well. I don't want there to be any connection or reason why Luke and Leia are twins as well. I don't want it connected in the slightest.
So one thing I will say, so I'm not going to spoil what you're talking about, except to say that it's not, so far that has not been a thing. But what I will say is that, like, again, I do kind of like that current Star Wars does tie back to. I like that this show ties into the prequels in a way that makes sense. Again, I don't like those movies. I think that all of them are bad, except maybe the third one is kind of fine. But one thing I do like is, like, they don't like make a big deal out of midichlorians, but there's definitely a moment where somebody does a blood test, where like a youngling does a blood test. You know, like so the stuff is there. Like they're basically saying that, like, we know this is dumb, but like it's in the thing and we're gonna do it. You know, like they are respecting the exist. They're not trying to like retroactively not make it a thing. And it's interesting you said the like twins thing, the Luke and Leia thing, because my first thought was like, oh, maybe they're a dyad in the Force, like in the Rise of Skywalker. That was my first thought. So again, I don't know how this is gonna go, and I'm worried about how it's gonna go. But I'm hopeful too. It's the first time in a while I've been legitimately it's the first time since Andor that I've been legitimately hopeful about a Star Wars thing. And I hope it sticks to landing. Because I do like it so far. I do. And I desperately want it to be great. I'll settle for it being good, but I desperately want it to be great.
As far as you know, are you getting a dump of the next 4 episodes as well from Disney?
No,
or are you going to watch it just with normal people?
No, I have to watch it with normal people. Well. On normal TV. I think I could have signed up for like episodic coverage, but I just wasn't going to commit to that. And also the timing of which they give you episodes in those kind of situations is also not great sometimes. So so yeah, I'm just going to watch it like normal on TV, as it were. And again, like, I hope it's good. I hope it's great. I worry that it won't be, but I will settle for it being good. But I hope that it's great. And either way, I hope that this isn't the last that we see of Saul. I really like Saul. I think he's great, and I really want to see more of that character.
Yeah.
But I also hope they don't. I don't know. It's a difficult thing to say ahead of time, but like, I also want the show to have stakes. So if it makes sense for him to die, then let's like see him die. That's fine. You know, like.
Yeah.
I do want to have a Star Wars show that is not afraid to kill people. And have like actual stakes for like life, and not just because like I think as much as I don't want to invoke him, but the director of the Avengers, of the first 2 Avengers film, was once asked about like how do you build stakes if your characters can't die, and he says, well, you have to have people around them die. Basically, like you have to find other ways to build those stakes, and I'm not sure that they can do that in the series. So somebody's going to die. Is my prediction. It's one of the mains is going to die. I don't know who it's going to be, but somebody's going to die.
Yeah.
Anyway, so for what you've seen, it's difficult to say with only 2 episodes. But how would you rate the first 2 episodes of The Acolyte so far?
This is difficult because it'll come back and bite me in the ass, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, again, that's I'm not saying rate the whole show. I'm just saying like episodes 1, episode 2, like you can rate them individually for where all I care. Like,
so I dislike the end of both episodes enough for it to be a 3-star instead of a 4-star. Like I didn't. The end of episode 2. I think there's some really weird directorial choices and editing choices at the end of these episodes. It's very, very specific technical stuff, but it kind of ruins both of the ends of these episodes have not been good. And so it's 3 stars for me at this point. An optimistic 3 stars. I really like a lot of what they're doing. And it's got Manny Jacinto in there. And so that's an extra star by itself.
That
was bugging the hell out. That was bugging me. Like, how do I know who this person is? And then I looked at the cast list. He's great.
Yeah, he is really good too. I feel like he doesn't have a ton to do so far, which is maybe why I haven't talked about him more. But his presence is welcome as the sort of scoundrel character that Star Wars always needs to have. For me, I think I would say that episodes 1 and 2 are both 3-star episodes, and episode 3 is a 4 for me, for sure. And episode 4 I sort of go back and forth on, but it's still a 3 at least. So yeah, I would say I'm cautiously optimistic about the show. Would be the way to put it. And I hope it's good. I hope it's great. I really want Star Wars to be good again. I saw someone online talking about how like their current experience of Star Wars is that like, and this is a very like millennial Gen X way to approach it, but like that when they were young, Star Wars was special. You know, there was we had so little of it for so long, and then we got more in the 90s and early zeros, and now we're getting this deluge of it, and the more that comes out, the less special that it is. And I can't disagree with that as a person who's lived through the same eras of Star Wars. Being alive through all the eras of Star Wars has been an interesting roller coaster, for sure.
Yeah. Sure.
But it feels like this could be a special one again, and I really hope that it is. I'm very hopeful. I'm not quite committed to say that it is that just yet, again, because that'll be made or broken by the ending, but I really hope that it is.
Good, so it's more positive and optimistic than I was expecting for us to be at this point, so that's good.
Yeah, me too. And again, I just want Star Wars to be good. I want to enjoy Star Wars. I want it to be doing different things. The other thing is that, like, I want them to do different things, and this is a very different thing. This is a Star Wars without a war in it. This is, I think, maybe the first Star Wars that isn't taking place during a war. So, I think that's interesting. It's an interesting exploration of the peacetime Star Wars galaxy, and I hope some more of it.
Yeah. Good. Well, shall we move on to our second thing? Why don't you give us the rundown of the complicated synopsis and structure of Sulasen?
Oh, man. So, yeah, we're running long, so I'm going to keep this short because I can. Sulasen est un film avec un requin à la ville Paris. That's the whole thing. There's a shark in Paris. That's literally the whole setup. There is a shark in the Seine, and it is a very weirdly blatant Jaws ripoff, and in the best way possible. The longer setup is that Bernice Bejo is a shark scientist who in the opening scenes is tracking sharks at the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and a mako shark kills her whole team. And then 3 years later, she finds herself swept up with a young group of shark conservationists because the shark that killed her team has made its way from the Pacific to the Seine River in Paris for reasons that are never explained. I mean, they're basically so they are explained, but they're explained so nonsensically as to why it's there. And they explain, like, the reason they gave is like, oh, okay, but how did it get to Paris? You know, why did they get to Paris
all this way?
Yeah, like, we're talking thousands of miles. But anyway, and then it becomes very much once they're in Paris, it basically becomes Jaws. There's a shark in Paris. The Bernice Bejo's character, Sophia, knows there's a shark and is desperate to warn the authorities that there is a shark and that they should not run the triathlon that's going to have the swimming portion in the Seine. And the Jaws mayor, the Paris mayor is like, no, we cannot shut down this. We can't shut down this event that is so good for tourism in our fair city and makes me look good. And then the sharks attack. There's a little more going on. The shark conservation group is revealed to be eventually, like, they're either not really good, they're not really bad, but they're not really good, and they sort of are causing more problems than they're helping to solve. There's a great scene in the middle. I would say that all you need to know is there's a shark in Paris. This is a movie that is as dumb as a bag of hammers, but so committed to itself. Such a wonderful B movie. Not trying to be so bad it's good or anything, but so committed to its own bullshit in a way that, like, we haven't really seen, like, since the 90s. Like, it's a kind of a rare kind of movie that used to be super common in the late 80s and into the 90s, where, like,
totally.
It's just a big concept and it's committed to the bit and everyone takes it seriously. It is super stupid that
in a really French way.
Sorry, in a really French way, but there's really like there's a real like commitment to that. Like, why would a saltwater shark be in a freshwater river terrorizing the city of like, it makes no sense. And I would also say that, like, it does take a minute to get going. Like, the first half of the movie is pretty slow. There's a lot of really good, like, foreshadowing, like visual foreshadowing, if you like, and, like, you can't miss it. I would say if you're gonna pay attention, but, like, you can't miss it. Like, this shit is, like, in the middle of the
script. There's nothing subtle.
Like, this movie is dumb as a bag of hammers and about as subtle as a sledgehammer. But there's a point in the middle where a pretty major shark attack happens, and it's one of those scenes where, like, you're like, this person's gonna die. Like, when is it gonna happen? This person's gonna die. I can't wait to see this person die. How horrible! What kind of death is this person gonna get? And then once that scene happens, the film kicks into high gear. And the second half, I think I alternated between howling with laughter and cackling with laughter for approximately 50 minutes. It takes a little bit to get going, but the second half of this film is so much fun that I cannot help but whole-chestedly recommend you watch it. It is so much fun, especially once especially once the triathlon happens and the Paris mayor gets her comeuppance. It's so good. Um, and then it ends in like a pretty admittedly sequel bait kind of way, but in a way where I'm like, of course that's what happened. Amazing. Like it is I don't know, it's a perfect summer B movie and you should definitely watch it, and I hope that all of you do. I don't know. Are you disagreeing with me on any particular point here?
Oh, I love this fucking film. I've said it before. I'm sorry, I'm going to repeat myself if you heard it in the Patreon episode. This is when you take a dumb idea, a stupid idea, and you treat it seriously. Like you get all the actors treat it properly, and also you shoot it and edit it brilliantly. This is a really, really well made film, and
it's really well shot.
A huge. Well, yeah, one of my favorite things about Christopher Nolan movies are his very low, almost industrial grade, like tracking shots. If you think of the beginning of Tenet when they run through the opera house and it tracks behind them, there's some low tracking shots up the Seine in this movie. I'm like, that's Christopher Nolan, and you're going to watch this movie and go, that's Christopher Nolan, that's Jaws, that's Aliens, that's Godzilla. Like this movie is very, very, very clear about where its inspirations come from, and it treats them all seriously. No one is winking at the camera. There's no Jason Statham in the Meg like, oh, I'm going to punch the shark in the nose. How did I do such a bad Jason Statham impression? But everyone is treating it seriously, and I kind of love the idea that Berenice Bejo's character in the pre-title sequence, she gets all the team killed by this shark. Turns out this shark was at this point of evolution, and they discover this by most of them being eaten horribly at the beginning.
It's true. This is very true.
And so I love this aspect where she's in Paris 3 years later and she's racked with guilt. And we see early on she's got her hair, so now she's serious. And these school kids jibe her about getting all her team killed, and she's racked with guilt. And I love the implication. There is an implication in this movie. Why is the shark in Paris? How is the shark in Paris? The shark is her guilt that she cannot shake. The shark is her deep-rooted psyche. The shark represents everything she could never leave behind. And so this whole movie is her facing up to this guilt that's haunted her for 3 years and doing something about it. What a film! Like shark as guilt, and also it's Jaws. I may be reaching, but it's
that's a pretty subtle implication for a movie that is otherwise, again, as subtle as a 10-kilogram sledgehammer.
But it's got there's a shark autopsy scene later on when they get one of the sharks. She's like, and they call her in. How is it here? And she's like, oh, look, it evolved freshwater nostrils. It's like, oh, okay. Like, oh, that's okay. She said it's not a mackerel anymore, it's a new species. Okay, great. And this is a movie that knows it doesn't have to explain anything more than that. It's like, okay, fine, shark's got nostrils, and now it can be brand new but still give birth to hundreds. So you've got your propagation threat, and then you've got aliens. It goes from alien to aliens with some fantastic underwater
the underwater stuff as well. The underwater stuff looks good, and that is hard to do. Right. Most stuff shot underwater looks terrible.
I just I'm reading reviews of this movie and my heart sinks because I'm seeing so many reviews like, oh, it flounders, it's dumb, it's basic. Like I want every aspiring filmmaker to watch this movie to realize how you take a big swing stupid idea and you make it serious by treating it seriously, by shooting it beautifully. The characters are the characters. They're not anything more than they need to be, apart from Bernice Bejo and her sort of police counterpart, Adil, played by Nassim Leis. And there's a lot good supporting cast. And the end, like you think there must be a way for it to end a certain way, and then it dares not to.
That's true.
I'm all over it. I'm all over it. All over this film.
And it's pretty telling that I don't think it's a spoiler to say that like Adil, who's like the river police sergeant who is Bernice Bejo's like partner in this film and trying to track down the shark, like, do you think, like, if you had to guess what his background was, and like, would your first guess be soldier with survival skill? Because like, spoiler alert, that's what he is. Because that's of course what he is. Like, this movie is a
With
film made of archetypes, and that is not a problem. Like,
it's
basic
great.
basic done well, basic done
Yeah,
fun is great. And
there's a
like,
lot to be said for a well-made film.
I'm not here to tell you that this is like, you know, the next Seven Samurai, but I am here to tell you that like, this is a fun summer movie, and I wish that I had seen it on a big
It's
screen.
great. Yeah,
So like, get yourself
absolutely.
some popcorn and a soda, and sit down on a warm day and watch a shark try to eat Paris, because like, this shit is fun.
Do you know what I
And
really like as well? I'm sorry. You finish.
no,
I've
go
got
ahead. Like,
I've
it's
got pinballing thoughts in my head about how much I love this movie. I think a lot about pacing in films, in all films, but especially films like this, and how often more amateur filmmakers rush through to get to the big scenes, right? And this film is a lot slower in the first half because it gives it a lot of time for us to see the characters just be themselves and sort of slowly get to the point where they realize things instead of getting up right there. And I really appreciate that. And when it does pull the trigger, you mentioned you want to see this in the cinema. The big Paris catacomb shark attack on the cinema screen would be unparalleled. Like, it's so well shot and edited, and a true sense of panic as well. Some great, like, over the top shark kills. There's some great early 2000s Sony TV 3D shark kills as well coming out of the screen. It's great.
Well, and no, something we mentioned about, or something I mentioned at least about the previous thing we talked about, is that like, in that middle scene, in the one where the shark first attacks and starts like and kicks the movie into high gear, in a scene that is legitimately full of extras, like there are dozens of extras in that scene, it is not afraid to kill named characters. Like, lots of people in that scene die who you've been following along with for the whole movie, and it gives it a real sense of stakes that many other films just don't necessarily have. But I think that's really smart, and honestly, if nothing else, it's full of hot French people. So like, just
oh my god,
like, everyone in this movie is super attractive. Like,
so
with the exception of like the police chief, who's an old man. But everyone else is super hot. Like, just
all
go
the
watch
policemen are ridiculously hot.
Yeah, it's a fun movie, man.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. There's everyone in France is hot. This is further proof that everyone in France is gorgeous and like has the emotion, blood and love, and it's just great. I love it.
Yeah,
I love this film.
So for you, where I'm hearing, I think a 4 out of 5 coming from you. So
yeah,
where are
this is
you landing on this film?
Yeah, this is a 4-star movie, and I'm a little shocked that I seem to be the outlier when it comes to rating this so high in terms of the reviews and stuff that I've read. Like, I think there's a certain snobbiness when it comes to film criticism these days that stops you appreciating a really well-made film for what it is. And this is what this is. It's very good movie. It's 4 stars.
It's interesting because I would say, what was I going to say? That at least on Letterboxd, the average review for me of my like Letterboxd connection seems to be like 3.5. So maybe it's just a matter of curating like your who you're following, because like, I mean, it sits at like 2.4 overall, so you're not wrong. But this might be a lesson in like finding people whose taste you share. For me, it's a 3. But it's a great 3. Like, this is probably an endlessly rewatchable shark movie.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I'm so happy that it exists. I'm very curious when the next one, because it ends in such a place that like another one's definitely coming, and
I hope so.
And I can't wait to see what they do with the second one.
As far as you know, was this a Netflix movie or a movie that Netflix bought?
Because I think it's a Netflix. I think it's a Netflix movie. I think
I've got no inside baseball on this, but if that's true, that's interesting because my wife really enjoyed the Lupin series, which was a Netflix France production and that was a really well-made series as well, better than many Netflix movies I've seen coming out of the Western production team. So I wonder if this is a Netflix France made movie. I wonder if they've got some magic secret sauce going on
there. Maybe. I mean, I would say that I think, and maybe this is controversial, but I think a thing I think is the best thing that Netflix has ever made is actually German. So maybe it's just a matter of.
Is that Dark?
Yeah, Dark is phenomenal. I can't
I need to watch that.
I cannot believe, and maybe it's just because of subtitles, but like, I cannot believe how many people love Stranger Things but have not seen Dark. Like, Dark is I would argue, a better show. It doesn't play the nostalgia the same way, though. So that's clearly the answer. But it is such a much better conceived show and a better acted show and it's definitely a darker show, both in terms of like its tone and the way it's shot and everything, but like, and more complicated. Like, it's definitely more complicated, but it's a great show. I can't believe more people haven't. I can't believe we don't talk about Dark in the same breath as Stranger Things all the time. What I'm trying to get to is that, like, I think that Netflix around the world must make shows that are like catered to their regional audiences, and I think that like probably those places have different expectations than we do, and I think that in North America, and I hate to say it, but we're part of North America, so Canada and America, like, I think we have this expectation of them being kind of cheap, and I think they play to that. And they make a lot of capital C content, because the most popular show in the world on Netflix is still Love is Blind. So, like, I think it's their bread and butter, right? So I think maybe we need to lean harder on Netflix for this international stuff. And honestly, like, Netflix is... We can debate the merits of Netflix as a corporation from here to the moon and back, but one of the most exciting things about Netflix is they give global distribution to stuff that we would never otherwise see. And I feel like not a lot of us, myself included, don't take enough advantage of that fact. And I wish that we would. So it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
True story.
Anyway.
Okay, good. Should we wrap it there?
Yeah, we should wrap it up there. So if you're listening to this, thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed the show, please feel free to give us a shout out. What did you think of The Acolyte? What did you think of Under Paris? You can find us on the socials. You can find me on the socials. I'm at SmatthewAF, basically everywhere. You can also find us. The easiest way to find us and all of our writing and our socials and all that stuff is to visit our various websites. So for Simon, that's temporarypen.com. For me, that is stretched.ca. For the show, that is awesomefriday.ca. And I do encourage you, in the links in the show description for this episode will be the homepage link for this particular episode at awesomefriday.ca. And there you will find Just Watch powered streaming links that will tell you the places you can watch these two titles, but also every title we've ever covered will have these. And if you use those links to get to where you can watch the shows, that'll help us keep the lights on. You can also support us by giving us a like or a follow or subscription on your podcasting platform of choice. Those things all put us in front of more earballs and are immeasurably helpful. And if you want to support us a little more directly, we do have a Patreon and a Ko-fi. And if you're a Patreon subscriber, then you get a bonus episode every week. This week we talked about shark movies. And another thing that escapes my mind.
Comic characters and adaptations.
Comic character adaptations and shark movies. And that's a fun conversation. And support there starts at just $2 Canadian. That's 2 Northern Golds for a whole 30-minute show.
Northern Gold.
That's what they're called. If Barbed Wire, the film, has taught me anything, it's that loonies are called Northern Gold. So feel free to do that. Last but not least, we are here in Vancouver, BC, Canada. We are recording on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. Thank you so much to everyone listening for joining us, and we hope you enjoy this awesome Friday.
Thanks, bye.